Thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Crendel. So, is everyone ready to practice their leadership this morning?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. And just for the note, I want to thank again Dr. Crendel. Is this really loud? For having us here, all her staff who is very helpful, Willie and Mark Pfeiffer and David Kindle back there he's a student back there. Hi, David. Okay. Do we have any other students in the room? We had a couple sign up. Any students? No? Usually we get one. It's September and it's probably like the 4th week of school, so it's probably they're just not getting used to not sleeping in anymore. So anyway, so we're going to talk a little about, how many of you have ever played a sport, a musical instrument, anything like that? How do you get better at it? You practice it, right? So, but how do you practice it? You usually go in your living room. If you're playing the piano, you usually go in your living room, you can practice it. What happens if you miss a note? Not a whole lot, right? Or in a sport, a lot of times teams will practice 4 or 5 days before they actually play a game. Sometimes it's 4 or 5 hours to 1 hour of play for practice. So practice is extremely important. So when was the last time that you practiced your leadership? How do you do that? How do you practice leadership? Okay. And so how many of you are leaders in here? Okay. Everyone. Everyone's a leader. Bear Bryant said that I make practices really hard because if a player is a quitter, I want him to quit in practice and not in a game. So that was Bear Bryant. And again, we always ask everyone, when's the last time you practiced your leadership? Now, we gave you a couple of handouts. One's an outline of today's session. And the other one looks like this. And we have these every time. So if you don't have any, there's plenty more up here. Faithful servant Willie will give you this. So this is what we call a leadership worksheet. And I'm going to go over it a little bit about kind of how to use this. What we want in the big, you notice it doesn't have any lines. Okay, so in the big blank spot under dump, okay, we just want you to put down things from this conversation. Or if you're reading a book, things from that. Now, do I want you to write down exactly what was said? No. What we want you to do is what you were thinking and how you were feeling. Okay? And then towards the end, you can actually then kind of chunk it into groups. You know, you can actually think maybe about taking away some of the ideas and what you're going to do with them during that day, or how you're going to approach a person at work. And then capture what's the one thing that you actually took away. And we use these a lot in our leadership institutes. We ask people to fill them out because in our leadership institutes, we actually ask people at the end as their assessment, to actually stand up and give their leadership philosophy. Right, Vicki? Vicki's going to do hers at the end of the month from CODA. So we ask them to do this, and they can actually take these, put them out in front of them, and it pretty much has all the values usually and all the ideas that they have about their leadership and how they're thinking about it and how they're feeling about it. Okay, so that's how. There's also instructions on the back if you want to look at that as well. But that's what those are for. And again, in a very, I remember Paul handed me notes like this one time, and he hands them to me and says, "Here, can you put them out?" And they looked similar to this. This is the one I did for Dr. Crendel's last week. So you can kind of see nothing's really in a line. I just sort of wrote things down. But then I pulled things out, okay? So that's really what we want you to do. And it just gives you a nice, simple, clear takeaway at the end of this. So let's talk a little bit about more about practice and what practice actually is. So in sports, you have to practice it before doing it. But in leadership, you have to practice while you're doing it. So if you're leading someone and you make a mistake, that sometimes can be very fatal, because you could disengage the person, you could not get the right productivity or the right result afterwards. So it's very, very hard in leadership to practice it. But if you can do it, I'm going to give you 4 ways to kind of consciously practice your leadership while you're doing it. And so let me define practice a little bit. Training is actually a process when someone is taught something, either by exercise, by practice, kind of by rote, okay, is training. Conditioning is to bring yourself up to a desired state, okay? So I think a lot of you are doing this today. You're kind of conditioning today. And practice is repeated performance of an activity that's not a theory, but something to get better at. So again, in sports, you practice before doing it, but in leadership, you have to practice while you're doing it. Okay? So I'm going to give you 4 concepts. And the first one, to be better leaders, this is what we know hundreds of leaders. We've watched them, we've listened to them, and these, I think, are 4 concepts that we've found that each one of them consistently does. So one of the best leaders, are continually stretching, which means they're always open to new ideas. They always find new sources of knowledge, and they move beyond theories. And I think they're always asking why, or what could be. Okay? They're inquisitive. They're usually also very well read, because they're constantly searching for new ideas. And they have a wide range of interests. So let me give you a quiz, because this is one of those things that, remember, we talked about training and how you do things by rote. So without looking, how many numbers are on the face of your watch? Anybody? 1? 12. There's 12 numbers. Okay. Look down and see how many numbers, and each number would count as 1. 15. But you don't see it all the time, because when you look at your watch, you're looking for the hands. You're not really looking at the numbers. So it's that level of detail is kind of what we're looking for. And it's often ignored. So the next one, and I'm going to go into each of these in depth, is consciously thinking. The best leaders, they're acutely aware of their own thinking. They monitor the process as they go. And they usually evaluate on the spot immediately. Okay? The next one that they do is the concepts is they do openly. Okay? They almost always give the intent, and we're going to go over what intent means, kind of understand that end state. All right? And what it's going to look like in the end. And again, they often critique as well, but they do it in an open, very transparent way. The next one is developing others. So a lot of leaders say, if I look at you and don't see part of me, I'm not leading you right. Okay? So, and again, being in an educational setting, one of the great ways to get better is to actually by teaching. Because if you know it yourself and you can teach it to others, you actually learn more about it as they ask questions. So it's developing others. They build on strengths, they set high expectations, and they build this mutual respect for each other by developing others. So let's explore each concept. So the first one is continually stretching. So everyone has their sphere of interest. And again, best leaders usually have a very, very broad spectrum of interest. Usually they have hobbies, They have things that they're interested in, or they do that you may not completely fit in their job, but it's something that as a whole person they bring to themselves. Because as you've always seen before, your sphere of interests, the wider it is, then the broader your sphere of influence will be as well. And that's really where leadership starts, is right there at the sphere of influence. So one of the things we want you to do today is broaden your leadership lens. And what do we mean by that? Instead of looking at leadership as just a set of skills or whatever it is that you can take away, we want you to broaden your lens. And we do that in our leadership institutes a lot by asking our participants to read a children's book. Now they look at us like we're nuts, okay? But if you've ever read a children's book, it's all about values and ideas and ideals. There's rarely any management in them, okay? But they are all about leadership. Pick one up and look at it through a leadership lens. You know, read The Little Train That Could and look at it from a leadership perspective. And I think that you will see kind of what that is. So that's the kind of broadness that we want you to look at, is to broaden that leadership lens. And I mean, Paul always quotes General Gray, you know, if you want a new idea, read an old book. So again, look at something in a different way. I have a story. We also talk about suspending judgment, okay? So don't look at what is, but look at kind of what could be. So there's a story that we tell, and this wouldn't be a leadership lesson without a story, because that's what those are. So we talk a lot about lateral and vertical thinking, okay? This would be an example of vertical thinking, okay? If this, then this, then this, okay? But I'm going to tell you a story about lateral thinking, kind of thinking more broadly and what could be. So there was a man, again, it's a story. There was a man back in Old England, and he owed a debt, okay? So he was to meet up with his debtor one day, and he didn't have the money to pay it back. And so what happened back then is that they actually had debtors' prisons, okay? So he knew that because he couldn't pay the debt when he met with his debtor, that he was going to go to prison. So his family comes with him because they're going to say goodbye to him. And he plans to meet his debtor on the shore of Dover. And the beaches in Dover look like this. They're not sand. They're white and black pebbles, okay? So the man and the debtor meet, the family's with them, and of course the man that owes the money says, I don't have the money. And the debtor kind of knew that this was going to, and he kind of concocted a scheme. So he said to the man, he said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to pick up 2 pebbles from the beach here, a white and a black, and I'm going to put them in my bag. Now, I've always admired your daughter. Now again, remember this was a long time ago. And I'm going to ask her to reach in the bag and pull out a pebble. If she pulls out a white pebble, the debt is forgiven and you can go on your merry way. If she pulls out a black pebble, your debt is forgiven, but she will have to marry me. Okay? All right. And if she does anything else, you will go to prison. Okay? So if she refuses or anything, whatever else she does, except for reaches in and pulls out a pebble, he'll go to prison. So a white one, all is forgiven. A black one, she has to marry him, but the debt's forgiven. And if she refuses or she does something else, then he has to go to debtor's prison. So what does she do? Any ideas? Any ideas as to what the daughter does? Because she has a vested interest in this, let me tell you. Okay, and she's the one that actually has to reach in and pull out a pebble. Okay, so the debtor reaches down, picks up 2 pebbles from the beach, and the daughter notices that they're both black. And he puts them in the bag. No one else notices that there are 2 black pebbles. There weren't a white one and a black one, but there were 2 black. So now what does she do? Any ideas? Usually we get this, call him out as a liar, or, you know. Pardon me? Picks up a white one, but how do you do that? She's standing there. That's a little tough. Any good ideas? Did you have one back there? Nope. So without hesitation, she reaches in the bag and pulls out a pebble. As she pulls it back, she steps, remember they have long dresses on, falls on the skirt, pretends to fall on the skirt of her, drops the pebble and says, "Oh, how clumsy of me. But to know which one I chose, all you have to do is look in the bag to see which one is left." Okay? So she didn't have to call him out as a liar. He didn't get caught. She did exactly what she was supposed to do. She didn't have to marry the guy. And Dad didn't have to go to prison. Okay? So lateral thinking, thinking outside the box. I often use this as an example, kind of a little more current one, is the catch court down in Columbus. Have everyone heard of that? So it's where it's usually, I think, in the municipal court where they actually bring in those that have been either trafficked or, and they put them in a program called Catch. And so it's, because what was happening was there were people who kept coming back in and back in, kept getting arrested, okay? So vertically, it was, this is, you know, they got caught doing something wrong. This is the process. Here's the sentence. They get released, and what happens? It goes right back. So what this judge did was he saw them not as criminals, but as victims, and kind of how to change that process so they didn't keep doing this vertical process over again. So we actually looked laterally, and what resources do they need to stop this cycle? So I think that is a great modern day example of lateral thinking. Because when you can look at it in a different way, he looked at them as victims, not as criminals. So I think that that's a great way to do that. So that is constantly stretching how you're thinking and how you're processing things. The next one is consciously thinking. So we often talk about this as thinking on the run, okay? And most people, when they run, they stick on a pair of earphones and they go out and they run for endurance, okay? They kind of get the beat that they want with the rhythm that they want. But the truly world-class runners actually think every time they take a step. They are constantly, did I land right? Do I have the right rhythm? Am I doing what's needed to be done? So that's the kind of thinking that we're talking about. As you're doing it, you're constantly reevaluating and thinking about what you're doing. They also do a lot of critiquing when they consciously think. Dennis McCarthy, who was here, we had a session with him that he had done for IGS, and afterwards he said, "Well, we got to have our hot wax now." And I said, "Our what?" And he says, "Our hot wax," because that's where you take the rank off and you just wash everything off and you figure out what was really there. So again, it was a critique, and it was very, very effective. But we really, really took the rank off of there and really got down to the nitty-gritty. No one was going to be offended. There were things that were done right, things that were done wrong. Let's figure out what those are and move on. So that's a military term. And also we talk about just the simplicity, just capturing that essence, and that's what we ask you to do at the bottom of your worksheet there. Just capture what that essence is and keep it simple. There's a favorite quote of ours from Oliver Wendell Holmes that is, and I got to read this, I would not give a fig for simplicity on this side of complexity, but I give my life for simplicity on the other side of complexity. So look for that, that simplicity. There was an example of this is there was a vote that I had to do on council, very emotional. You know, you have people coming up in front of you crying or yelling at you and getting, it got very, very complex. It was a rezoning. Yeah, everyone loves rezoning. But it got really, really complex. And finally, the last person, after, I don't know, 30 people getting up and speaking, the last person said, "It's zoned wrong." And I went, that's it. That's the simplicity. Out of all this complexity is the fact that this piece of land is not zoned for its highest and best use. It was just that simple, but it got very, very complicated. It got very, very emotional. And it was so complex. I was so confused. And you've been there. You felt that. But when he got up and said, "It's just zoned wrong," I went, yeah, it's pretty that simple. So that's my best one on that. The French also have a term called coup d'oeil. About if you can look that up, it's really about just that simplicity and just moving forward in that. The next concept. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. All right. Let's go into this one. So how many hours in a day are you responsible for? Anybody? All of them? It's actually a good question. 8. Some people give 8. 18? 18 hours. How many people do you lead?
Lead?
Mm-hmm. 4?
Yeah, but then I think about my children. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have at least 8-hour days. So you multiply that by, because you're responsible for the people that you're leading. Okay? So I think that's, I missed one. I missed a slide. I missed a doing openly. That's what this is supposed to do. All right. I don't know where that is, how that got out of there. But doing openly is the next concept. And we really talk about that end state. That what do you want to look like at the end? A lot of people call it vision. But it really is understanding kind of what, if you can give people what it is at the end, they can help you get there. But if they do not know what it's supposed to look like, it's a little tough to do. A lot of managers will give a project, and then when it's finished, they'll give another part of a project. But the people don't quite understand what they're doing. They just do that project. But at the end, maybe you're trying to figure out what the intent is, or what the project, and they go, oh, well, I found this way back here at the beginning during this project, but I didn't put it in there because it wasn't relevant to the question that you asked me. So if people understand why, there's a story that Dennis McCarthy tells too. We have a lot of military examples here in leadership too, but there is one, and I think actually he told it as well. There's one where a commander gave a sergeant a task to make sure that the enemy does not cross this bridge. Okay? That was the direction. So what does the sergeant do with takes his team out? He goes and he blows up the bridge. Okay? Because the enemy's not going to cross a bridge that's not there. But what the commander failed to say is that we want you to make sure they don't cross it because we're going to have our troops come across it tomorrow. Okay? So just make sure that people understand what the intent is. Unfortunately the sergeant didn't say, well, why do you want me to make sure the enemy doesn't come across? But, so again, as either as a leader or a follower, make sure that you understand what that intent is and that you're doing openly. So again, by doing openly, we often share your ideals with your followers. You share your ideas. Again, that's all part of our leadership philosophy. So usually we ask our participants to stand up and answer the question. Someone's going to ask you, or you're going to answer the question, what are you going to get when you follow me? This is what you're going to get. And I did that with, I was president of a nonprofit board, and the president before me was a very, very different leader than I was. She was very analytical, which was great because that's what the organization needed at the time. I am not, however, that analytical. I tend to be more, I like looking at big pictures. I like doing more strategic things. And I went to I met with each board member and said, you know what, I'm going to be different, and this is how I'm going to be different, and this is what to expect of me. And it really made for a much easier transition. And also just really understanding people and kind of where they're doing, but doing it openly, talking about it, admitting I'm a very, very different leader. So meetings are going to be very different. She had agendas that she went through. Mine are going to be more open-ended because that's what is needed right now. So really do it. And again, people do openly by telling examples, telling stories. That's the great thing about leadership, is if you can give someone an example of what you're trying to do or how it had been done, good and bad, like the bridge story, you blow it up, then that's kind of how you do openly. And a lot of times, we get so busy that sometimes we forget to convey that. We forget to do that openly. And actually, someone came up with a great idea, is not to really have a to-do list, but make sure you also have a to-don't list, okay? These are the things that you're not going to do. And hopefully that doesn't change as much as your to-do list. Now, I'm a list maker, and I get satisfaction of scratching it off. In fact, sometimes if I've done something and it hadn't been on my list, I'll put it on my list just so I can scratch it off, okay? So, but again, doing that openly. So knowing what you're doing and bringing others along, and just really talking about your ideals. Make sure that they know what they're going to get if they're going to follow you. I think that's just very, very important. And the last one is developing others. So at the Ross, and this is probably the one I'm going to spend the most time on, because I think this is one of the most important ones. At the Ross Leadership, we talk a lot about engagement. We have a whole session on engagement, because we feel like that's an extremely important aspect to leadership. You have to have engaged participants. And let me define engagement for you. Engagement is, no, I can't remember what it is. It's consistent, sustaining effort. Okay? It's that doing what's expected and a little more. Okay? Disengaged, on the other hand, is coming in, clocking in, putting in your 8 hours, going home. So you're not adding value. Really, engagement is about adding that sustained value to an organization. Okay? So we have engaged, disengaged, which I never really liked that term. To me, it's just sort of there. I think is probably a better term. You come in, you do your work, you go home. And then you have the actively disengaged. And those are the people hanging around the water cooler going, can you believe what they did this time? And they're the hardest to deal with for some leaders. I really find, actually, to me, the hardest ones to deal with are the engaged leaders, because to me, they're hard to lead. I think it's easy you almost have to manage a disengaged or an actively disengaged worker. But I find the engaged worker is really, I think, more difficult to lead because you've got to give them that autonomy. You've got to delegate to them and let them, and really have that, build that trust and that respect with them. To me, that's, not that it's hard, but I think it's the most challenging. So we always talk about engagement and the 30-50-20. So in Gallup and Towers Perrin and all the different, I think McKinsey actually has a study out now too, 30% of the workforce is engaged. That's a scary number. Only 30% of the people are actually adding value to the organizations. And this is worldwide. They surveyed millions of people. 50% of the people are disengaged, meaning they're coming in, doing what they need to do. And there's 20% that are actively disengaged. And that's a scary thing too. We often talk is if your leader is disengaged, it's really hard to engage those below them. It's really, really difficult to do that. So so how can we, how do you increase this engagement? I mean, this is average, okay? So hopefully your organization's a little bit more than 30%. Could be, could not be. So what we found is so you can either you can build on their strengths, you can build on their weaknesses, okay? And that actually pops it up by a little bit because at least you're paying attention to people. So if you come in every day and criticize the person that's working for you, you're at least paying a little bit of attention, okay? But if you ignore them, that disengagement and that actively disengagement goes very, very high, really high. Because think about a 5-year-old, we're all human. So if they're not going to get positive reinforcement from you, what are they going to do? They're going to do something wrong because they're not going to allow you to ignore them. Okay? They're going to do something bad so they at least capture your attention. Okay? So if you don't give them positive, they're going to probably try to act for negative. Okay? So they're going to become actively disengaged because people do not want to be ignored. It's just simple human nature. You completely check out when you do that. So they also found in Gallup that if you build on people's strengths, engagement goes up to 61%. If you come in every day and talk about, build on their strengths, put the right people in the right jobs so that they have the passion and they're passionate about what they're doing, engagement goes up to, actually technically goes down to 38%. But the actively disengaged, you're still going to have a few in there. You're always going to have some of those. Whether it's, if I could tell you how to get rid of all of them, I think I'd have a pretty good book and be on a bigger speaker circuit here. But yeah, so developing others is really talking about this engagement and how that is. So when you build on someone's strengths, you shouldn't do it in a way that it's like superior and subordinate, okay? We always look at it as kind of a teacher and a scholar. Again, going back to if you can teach it, it's a lot easier to learn it. And so having that relationship with your followers, because especially in mentoring, we work a lot in mentoring here at Otterbein, if you have a mentor and you're not learning from them, then you're not doing it right, okay? So you really do have to develop others, but you should be growing yourself as you're doing it. And again, having that respectful relationship of that teacher-scholar. Sometimes it's hard to know who's leading who in some of these relationships. So, any questions so far? Yeah, right.
Yeah, move the needle, and
Oh, yeah.
what have you done,
A lot of times it's just awareness. It's just awareness of what we do. I'll go forward a little bit here. Is one of the things that we devised at the Ross Leadership Institute. Again, I told you we had leadership institutes, and at the end, people had to stand up and give their philosophies. And we had someone from Worthington Industries who actually talked about every night. He was a supervisor, I think on the second shift. Every night before he went out, he would put, and jokingly put, 50 please, thank yous, and good jobs in his pocket. And he wouldn't go back to his office until he actually kind of gave those all away. So sometimes just raise engagement is just sometimes simple as saying, please, thank you, and we actually now call it well done. If you just give people a little bit, you just give them some encouragement. And make sure that when you say well done, that it was well done, okay? Again, if you don't want to be critical about it, maybe that's a little more crucial conversation that you need to have with someone. But again, it's just that simple. Again, looking for that simplicity on the other side of complexity. And so what we have here is, these are screen cleaners, because we used to have clickers. Okay, so we had people carry around clickers, and if you said please and thank you, you click it. So you try to do it 50 times, okay, a day. And if you did that for 20 days, it would actually become habit. It was something there. So we kind of moved up. Everyone's got a cell phone. So these are screen cleaners that'll attach to the back of your cell phone. And they say please, thank you, and well done. So every time you touch your cell phone, it'll remind you, oh yeah, I want to raise the level of engagement and do that, please, thank you, and well done. So I have one for everyone here today, just to kind of remind you. So other ways that you can practice your leadership is, everyone gets the leadership minute in here, right? Okay. Happy to have people write them and submit things to us. It's not an easy job, but we get a lot of great positive comments on those, and they've been wonderful. One of the things I want to do this fall, because a lot of people have asked, we get the criticisms too of the leadership minutes too. People either don't like them, or and then they just unsubscribe. Or they're critical of them, which is great, because as long as we're getting people to think about them, and think about their leadership, that's really what they're there. You don't have to agree with every one of them. But one of the things I want to do is I want to do quotes. People like them. I think we're coming into the busy season of the fall with the holidays. Simple, easy read. So I thought I'd do a couple weeks of quotes. So if you all would email me your favorite quote, I will be more than happy to credit you with giving me this quote. Obviously, I need the actual person who actually said the quote as well. Or if you want to make up one of your own and you can attribute yourself to that quote, that would be great. But we just thought it'd be great to do a couple weeks worth of quotes. So if you can do that, I'm happy to say Ray Mazzata, his favorite quote is X, and kind of put it out. But I also think quotes kind of helps get people thinking in the right direction too, and kind of giving that simplicity. So we do the leadership minutes every day, 5 days a week. We've been doing them since, I'm going to credit Lori Wingard here, who said, Debbie, you got to get him to do a blog. And I go, I can't get him to do a blog, but I can get him to do a short leadership minute, just a short thought every day. So, and it's all part of that leadership practice. So also part of the practice is obviously these leadership hours, or anything that you do to help practice or condition yourself for leadership. And again, consciously thinking about it, constantly stretch, and doing all of that. I think I did the leadership worksheets. Any questions? I pretty much have. Yes?
You mentioned something about a French term for simplicity. I didn't catch
Koodoy, Koodoy. DOY. It's that simplicity of it. And it's a great way to describe it. It's also kind of a pretty word. Actually, there are 2 words, but yeah. Any other questions? Anything else? Mr. Loda.
I'll ask you a hard question.
Sure.
You have all been doing leadership training for quite a while. What's your biggest success in developing a leader? And what's your biggest failure?
Our biggest success, well, I think a lot of them have come from CODA. We do the William H. Loda Jr. Leaders of the Future class at CODA. I think there have been several. I want to say Rashad's probably our biggest. I think Paul would say that as well. There was someone who was in customer. Oh, Rashad was he was just a customer service representative there. And he caught us in the hall a couple of days ago. And he was very, very timid, very unsure. He was also going through a lot of personal things. And I don't think it's only us that helped him. I think some of the leadership at CODA helped him as well, kind of through a lot of this. But he caught us last year in the hallway and says, I'm now customer service manager. And when he started in the institute, Paul and I kind of went, not sure about this, but he really is the one that grew. So it's watching people grow and watching people get it. A lot of times it's watching the leadership philosophies, those assessments. To me, that's my favorite part of it, because you watch how people grow from the beginning to the end. But that's probably the biggest success. I also love it when we do the Myers-Briggs, and you can watch the light bulbs go out. Oh, that's why that annoys me. Or, oh, that's why I act like that. It's okay. And so part of it is self-acceptance as well, and really knowing yourself, and really people understanding that. Failures, boy.
No names.
Oh, I got how much? We only have like 10 minutes left, so I don't know if I could. Yeah, you feel a lot. We've walked away from some places. I can remember one institute where we were talking about engagement, and we always ask them what they think the level of engagement is in their organization. And what they said was the percentage that they gave, if you added up the number of people in the room against the number in the organization, it meant that not everybody in the room was engaged. And we pointed that out, and they go, yeah, and your point is? That was that was a difficult situation to be in, because they were putting kind of mid-level or lower levels through this leadership class, but the problem is that the leaders at the top weren't going by the same philosophy. And so we had one person come to us and said, I tried to do this concept, and my boss thought I was crazy. And I think he wants to fire me now, because he doesn't accept this as a way to work. That to me was the biggest failure we had, because we were trying to help people improve. And if it's not from the top down and from the bottom up, it's not going to work. That I think was probably our bottom. Paul and I looked at each other and we said, I don't know that we can help this organization. And you have to know that just to be able to walk away. We tried. Yes, Joel?
You mentioned when you were talking about Rashad, and I'm curious how this relates, or how it maybe ties in. You said that you weren't too confident that he would be able to move forward. Was that more vertical thinking on your part? Or
Probably.
was it shifting to lateral, and then what was it that...
Part of it was his personality and just kind of how he reacted to being in the program. You're right, it probably was a little vertical thinking on our part. But like I said, as far as growing the most out of a person, and we've told him this, so if he watches this tape, I'll make sure he gets a copy of it. But he probably was our biggest, it was just amazing growth. And he should be very proud of himself because we're very proud of him. So I think that that's the best way to do that. Any other questions? We've got a couple more minutes left. Anything else? We can let you go on this beautiful morning. Yes, Lori.
How much value do you and Paul put into all those assessments that are out there? Obviously, like Myers-Briggs, but there's strengths, finder, there's DISC, those kinds of things. Do you see them work in companies that you?
We use pretty much exclusively the Myers-Briggs. We have done, I've done a lot of them. There's a couple of them, and Paul's probably a better one to ask, but there's some of them that you can kind of almost manipulate because they're,
DISC might be.
yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. But I've done strengths finders. I thought it was right on for me. I think anything that will help you learn a little bit more about yourself and also build that confidence within yourself and kind of accepting, yeah, you know what, I am a maximizer. I get it. That makes sense to me. And I'm now going to make that, I'm now going to make sure that I get the best out of everybody, and I'm going to get the best out of myself. So that's what I learned from Strengths Finders. But we do use, I think all organizations use some sort of personality assessment, but because I think it's important for leaders to know who they are first before they can lead anybody else. And again, having that philosophy of saying, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, and this is what you're going to get if you follow me. I think that's extremely, extremely important in being a leader. Anything else? No?
So I want to thank Debbie so much.